Welcome back to Counselor's Corner. I'm your host, and today we're looking at the profound human paradox. Why do we desperately pray, wish, or seek for things to change, but then completely reject the very tools people or truths have sent to help us? We're going deep into Matthew chapter 11. And we're going to map it out using the Universal Resilience Model, URM, to see how internal cognitive traps keeps us stuck. We're breaking open the echo chamber of the mind to discover the hard, liberating road to accountability and true change. Let's dive in. Let's look directly at Matthew 11:18 through 24. Jesus addresses a crowd that's completely impossible to please. He notes that John the Baptist came fasting and living strictly in the wilderness, and the critics said he has a demon. Then Jesus comes eating, drinking, and celebrating with every people, and the exact same critics say, "Look at him, glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and a sinner." The Chorazin and Bethsaida wolves. Jesus then turns to the cities where he performed his greatest miracles, Chorazin and Bethsaida and Capernaum, and rebukes them for seeing the proof yet refusing to change their hearts. The Greek word used here is metaneo, which literally means to change one's mind, to transform one's perspective and lifestyle. He warns them that even in ancient Sodom would have repented if they had seen what these critics or cities saw. And I think of that as receiving Jesus Christ in our hearts today. When our life flips for him, that we change our perspective, we change the way we think, we change the way we interpret things, it changes our life. The issue in these cities wasn't a lack of evidence, a lack of power, or a lack of good options. The issue was stubborn, hidden commitment to staying exactly the same. They have created a relational and mental echo chamber where no message could satisfy them because they fundamentally rejected personal accountability. Clinical integration in cases profile. The URM lens on stagnation. In our clinical practice, we see the exact same pattern play out every single day. When we look through the lens of the Universal Resilience Model, URM, we understand that resilience isn't just about passively bouncing back from crisis. It is about the volitional willingness to radically accept reality and adapt. When a person traps themselves in an echo chamber of excuses, they exhibit three specific clinical behaviors. The trap of rigid schemas. The critics had a fixed, unyielding idea of how help should look. Because John didn't fit in and Jesus didn't fit in, they dismiss both. In therapy, clients often reject clinical coping mechanisms because it won't work before they even try it, just desperately protecting your familiar pain. Defensive dissonance. When truth challenges a person to look at their own core beliefs and maladaptive behavior, the ego rebels. It is psychologically easier to criticize the counselor, the method, or the homework, just like calling John demon-possessed or Jesus a glutton, than it is to the hard eternal work of accountability. The mirage of miracles without effort. The cities wanted the spectacle of the miracles, but not the transformation of the lifestyle. In therapy, we call this wanting the result without the process. And then the illustration of the Goldilocks client. Think of clients who come to the clinic in a deep distress, begging for change. They see a counselor who is highly structured, directed, and holds them accountable. The client leaves saying they are too clinically cold and harsh. I can't work with that. The switch to a counselor who's deeply empathetic, reflective, and client-centered. The client leaves saying they just sit there and listen. They aren't giving me the answers. It is a waste of time. Just like the generation Jesus described, the issue isn't the counselor's style. It is that the individual is unconsciously looking for a reason to reject help so they can remain safely in their comfort zone of dysfunction. The Semmelweis reflex. This is the ultimate historical example of Chorazin and Bethsaida mindset, rejecting a miracle because you do not like the messenger. In the 1840s, a doctor in Vienna named Ignaz Semmelweis figured out that the mortality rates in maternity wards plummeted instantly if doctors simply washed their hands in a chlorinated solution after performing autopsies. It was a medical miracle. Instead of celebrating him, medical establishments was furious. Doctors were considered gentlemen, and the idea that gentlemen's hands could be unclean offended their egos. They completely rejected his data, fired him, and went back to their old ways, leading countless preventable deaths. In psychology, this literally is called the Semmelweis reflex, the human tendency to reject new evidence because it contradicts established norms. They were trapped in a defensive dissonance. Their rigid schemas prevented them from adapting even when the truth was staring them in the face. The redemption of Robert Downey Jr. Conversely, we see the power of the breaking the echo chamber in a widely recognized recovery journey of an actor, Robert Downey Jr. In the late 90s, he was trapped in a severe addiction. He was the classic Goldilocks client, given every resource, sending him to multiple world-class rehabs and standing before multiple judges, but he constantly rejected the process. He wanted the results to be healthy and work without the grueling process of eternal change. His transformation didn't happen through an effortless, magical wave wand. It happened when he finally hit a point of radical acceptance. He stopped fighting the methods. He embraced the intense, uncomfortable discipline, structured therapy, and accountability. He stopped complaining about the music being played, broke his maladaptive schemas, and used the URM framework to build the absolute psychological resilience. And here's a mind transformation key. So, how do we break our own echo chambers? How do we stop acting like the critics of Chorazin and step into freedom of the truth promises? In the universal resilience model, we utilize a precise tool called the mind transformation key. If you are tired of making excuses, I want you to use this key to audit your mind this week. All right, so identify the mismatch, defensive hiding. So what your mind does, which is the trap, how to apply it, the action step, and the scriptural reality. Okay, so identity, the mismatch, defensive hiding. You ignore the gap between what you say you want and what you are actually doing. Naked data audit. Put your actions right next to your goals. Force yourself to look at your daily habits nakedly and honestly. Test yourself to see if you are in faith. 2 Corinthians 13:5. Number 2, catch the yeah but. The echo chamber. The moment you feel guilty or uncomfortable, Your mind immediately blames someone else or makes an alibi. I'm guilty of this. Surgical interruption. Catch yourself saying, yeah, but, or it's yes, just that. Stop the sentence mid-air. Recognize it is a defensive shield. The companion of fools suffers harm. Proverbs 13:20. Count the long-term costs. Ego protection. You prioritize feeling right in the short term over actually being healthy in the long term. Put the excuse on the trial. Ask yourself a blunt question. Blaming them makes me feel better for 5 minutes, but it does it actually fix my life? There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. Proverbs 14:12. Radical acceptance. Stubborn stagnation. You refuse to change because you are waiting for a perfect, painless, custom-made solution. Drop the alibi. Repeat this out loud. My current strategy is failing. The responsibility belongs to me, and I will tolerate the discomfort of the change. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. Behavioral activism. The spectator illusion. You look for a magic trick for an overnight miracle instead of putting in a daily effort. Execute one fact. Identify one specific action you can take in the next 24 hours that actively violates your old excuse, and do it. Wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. Matthew 11:19. The structural truth cannot set you free until you stop lying to yourself about the data. The moment you drop the alibi, the echo chamber collapses and the path to real transformation opens up. And I think your true the ability to open your eyes, or your spiritual eyes, happens at this point. Okay. Closing call to action. Thank you for joining me on Counselor's Corner. Remember, wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. The proof you're healing isn't the insights you gather or the podcast you download, but in the structural actions you take. Benediction. May you have immense courage to face reality exactly as it is. May the Lord grant you deep humility to drop your alibi, step out of the echo chamber of excuses, and accept the help and truth that has been sent to you. And may He grant you the unshakable resilience to set your thoughts, be transformed, and your mind renewed, walking forward in the true freedom of Christ. Amen. If this episode challenged you or shed a light on an area where you've been stuck in a yeah but loop, do not keep yourself. Step into immediate behavioral activation. Take the one concrete action in the next 24 hours to shatter your old excuse. Head over to Counselor's Corner's Facebook page. Right now, I pinned community discussion posts on today's episode. Drop a comment and share with us. What is one piece of advice, boundary, or clinical tool you've been ignoring or making excuses for in your life? Let's talk about it openly. Support one another. Break down the rigid schemas and build true community resilience together. Let's go over some of this, what we talked today. And it really, why do we do this stuff? So, number one, really, so if we were looking for a reason why we're going to change, relives the exhaustion of the Goldilocks trap. Many believers spend years running from church to church, book to book, or counselor to counselor, looking for a perfect fit or a painless fix. They feel exhausted and spiritually defeated because nothing seems to work. The comfort. This message gently but firmly turns the mirror around. It reveals the problem. It isn't that God has failed to provide help, but that our own internal defenses are blocking it. Realizing the solution isn't out there in some elusive perfect method, but rather right here in a willingness to surrender brings immense relief. The search can stop, and that's almost like a crutch. Number 2, it normalizes the internal battle. It is easy for Christians to feel like they are failing spiritually when they experience internal resistance, doubt, or psychologically coping mechanisms like denial. The comfort by showing those who witness Jesus' physical miracles struggle with defensive dissonance. This message affirms the human condition